Okay, so this is my infographic for Info 362, and I guess we'll start off by explaining what visual potential is. Essentially, visual potential it comes in 5 different forms, as we've explored in this class. They come in numbers, appearance, location, relationship, and time, typically. So when it comes to numbers, we can exploit that visual potential by using numbers or amounts or sizes of elements to represent numbers, amounts, and sizes of the data that we're trying to represent. When it comes to appearance elements, we can exploit the visual potential there by using images that are instantly recognizable, or by using representations that will explain to the viewer what something looks like. Exploiting location means we can use the position of elements on the page to represent the positions of things relative to each other in the world. Maps are a good way to exploit that kind of visual potential. To exploit the visual potential of relationships, we can think about the connections between people and data, and then use shapes, and then use the connection between shapes to highlight those relationships. Lastly, for time, we can exploit its visual potential by thinking about how the data is ordered relative to each other. The data being things like events, for example. Then we use the relative space between elements on a line, grid, or circle to represent the occurrences. Okay, and so with that said, we can move on to the actual displays inside the infographic. So we'll start from top to bottom. We'll start with the map here. It exploits the visual potential of location. You can kind of see that because we're using a world map to kind of show the total prize money won by countries for this for the Evolution Championship Series, which is the fighting game tournament. It uses some amount of encoding, particularly 2 kinds, size and color. Size is used with these circles. The larger the circle, the more money a country has won. And also color. White highlights that is the country that has won, and black means that that country has not won any amount of money at all. So those are the 2 types of encoding that this display uses. When it comes to color, I've emulated the model to the best I can, as well as the layout. The layout puts a map location here, as well as a different colored background to make it pop more. In addition, the colors that this model uses are complementary. And furthermore, the typography of this here is a serif font that's similar to the model that I chose. Most of the titles are all caps, so that's what I've done here. Total prize money won by country, it's all in caps. And also the way that they do the colors, they have one color and then another color, and then also the size. The top is usually smaller, and then the bottom is usually a bit larger. There are some annotations that I use as well, so that you can tell what the money actually means. So it says 7,424 total money won by players from Canada. $277,161 total money won by players from the United States. So those are kind of labels or annotations so that you can understand what the numbers mean. Because without context, it's difficult to understand what they mean. Some limitations with this display, however, is there are overlapping circles over here in the Japan side, so it kind of blends in and it's unclear it can be unclear how the relationship, or not the relationship, but how the circles actually fit with each other, because there's a very large circle in Japan, then there's this smaller circle in Korea, so it can get kind of confusing looking at that there. Let's see. Next up, we can talk about this the series timeline. It's a simple timeline, 1 year apart. So what I've done is I've tried to make these lines as close as possible, or equidistant from each other, because every time it's a year apart, but maybe just a couple days, before or after. In addition, there is some encoding, not much encoding, I should say, because this was a difficult one to encode, because there's not much data that you can code, unlike the map, where you can highlight money with size. For time, it's a little bit more difficult for that, so there's not much encoding there. You could possibly argue that this blue text for date is kind of encoding, but I think I would rather say that creates more of a unity feel, because all of the dates are this blue type of color. Next, we can say that this text here are annotations for each specific year here, and a title tied to that specific year. And so that's how I've used text to emulate. The text model also uses capital letters for most title like elements, so that's what I've done there, here, there, and there. And then they kind of have paragraphs that are just kind of like this. Next up, I've tried to create oh, and one last thing, for all the elements I've created a timeline or titles, like how I've done here. A slightly lower text here and a larger text there. We can move on to the numbers display down here. Evolution Championship Series, total money awarded. So what this is trying to show is that for this game, for example, Super Smash Bros. Melee, the total amount of money that this game has given out is $48,950. Ultra Street Fighter 4, or just Street Fighter in general, has given out $102,000, $102,060. And so these appearance elements are used because they're very recognizable. So for the audience that will see this, they can instantly know what this is. But even if you don't, you can kind of just read what game this is, and you can instantly understand that that's how much money that this game particularly awarded. So the way this is labeled is also based off of the typography model. It has a kind of a rounded rectangle or oval shape, and then there's some kind of label inside. And so I've emulated that with these numbers, and also these the name of the game here. Let's see. Evolution 2015 top games. So in 2015, these were the two top games that gave out the most prize money. The total prize money being $303,500. This can be particularly this part could be difficult to understand because this isn't really laid out clearly. I think that this probably could have done better, because it's not instantly, you don't instantly know that that was the actual total prize money for 2015, because I guess I could add some kind of text element to kind of explain that, but I did not. But 24% goes to this game, 18% goes to this game, and then this was how much was awarded for each games. And also uses some amount of encoding because this circle is bigger, this circle is smaller. So the bigger the circle, the more money. The smaller circle, the less money. Okay. Next, we can go on to the relationship display over here. Top player distribution across games. So what this is trying to show is that these are top players that play both Street Fighter, or all of these games. So Street Fighter 5, Killer Instinct, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and Street Fighter 4. And if you look over here, Momochi, Infiltration, Fudo, and GamerB only play Street Fighter games. And up here, Rico Suave plays all three: Killer Instinct, Street Fighter 4, and Street Fighter 5. Sonic Fox plays Street Fighter 5 and Killer Instinct, and so on and so forth. And then over here, you can see that Armada, Hungrybox, and Zero play both games, and then Mr. R and Nairo play only this one game. And so these are, please note that these are top players only, not, of course, every single player, because there would be too many to list out. So this uses the color model. I've tried to create a sense of unity by using this blue color whenever I'm using these type of lines and circles. So that's where the blue color comes in. And I've grayscaled these images to try and create a sense of unity as well, because if it's colored, then it would clash with the color model. But you can also see over here, though, that these are colored, but I did that intentionally because that kind of creates a sense of variety, since these are the only elements that are colored. So that kind of creates a sense of variety there over here. When it comes to text here, these labels are, you can see this white, gray, white, white, gray, white, white, gray, white, gray, white, gray, white. That's done intentionally because the text typography model also has their labels done in this fashion, and so I've attempted to emulate it just like they did. Next up, we can talk about the visual hierarchy here. So let's see if I can zoom out real quick. So first off, what I wanted the user to kind of look at first was kind of this section here, because it's so colorful. I didn't grayscale it. That was one of the reasons, because I want them to see that these are kind of the most important games at Evolution Fighting Game Tournament: Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Killer Instinct, and Super Smash Bros. Melee. And so they kind of instantly know that these are pretty important games at the world's largest fighting game tournament. And the gray background also helps with that. And then they kind of see this other gray background, and they can kind of see a quick overview of what kinds of countries are most competitive when it comes to playing fighting games. So you can see that here instantly, all this white. So Canada, North America, Chile, Sweden, UK, France, Japan, Korea. So that's what I kind of wanted the user to kind of see. And then there's also this big blue block here. So the title is stands out very, very very well, I would say, because it's so blue, and there's also this giant logo here, and it's just much bigger than everything else. And then lastly, they look at this timeline, and this text is intentionally small because it's not as important. It's just some extra information that the user can kind of read about for that year. But this title is intentionally larger because it'll give them a quick overview of what happened that year. And then over here, the pictures are much larger because I think it creates instantly more recognizable feeling, because these are appearance elements. and then the text is a little bit smaller. If you don't actually know what game these come from, then you can just, look at the text next to it and figure out what actual game it is. Okay, let's see. Next up, I've kind of talked about Unity and Variety already, talking about how this was intentionally not grayscaled and these were grayscaled. And lines, I made blue everywhere, including the map, timeline, and in the relationship display. Those are all blue. When it comes to layout, I attempted to emulate the Harvard layout. So it's very similar. They have their title up here in the left corner inside of a rectangle that's colored. They have their map over here in the right corner with a different colored background, and then they have some number displays also in the bottom left with the background. What's different here though is that they had a bunch of smaller miscellaneous data points along the middle. So instead, I've opted to just put my timeline in the middle instead of having a bunch of smaller data elements. And so there are some limitations to that because the way that theirs is more separated, there's a little bit more sense of alignment. So this kind of doesn't have that sense of alignment, but there's still alignment in the sense that this is 3 rows, which is kind of what they did. So 1 row up here, 1 row in the middle, and then a row on the bottom. I guess next we can talk about alignment. I've tried to create a sense of alignment by aligning these 2 displays here along the text, and then also right here along the right side, and then also here, in terms of rows. There's also a sense of alignment with this timeline here. All these text elements are lined up, and then there's some alignment here. These number displays are all lined up by their centers, and that's about it really for alignment. I feel like if there was more displays, you could play around with alignment more, but with only like about 5 displays here, alignment's a little bit more difficult there. I think that's all I have. So thank you very much for listening, and I will see you later.